Well, hello. I am Jason Bretzman and a social studies teacher. I teach AP Government and Politics, and I also teach a civics class called American Issues. And we're here tonight talking with some brilliant social studies educators, and I'll let them introduce themselves. Jump.
I'm Michael Natera, and I teach 6th grade world history and an 8th grade international relations class at University School of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Happy to be here discussing some good teaching strategies and history with a bunch of great educators tonight.
I'm George Phillip. I teach.
Sorry, go, George.
Oh, sorry, Chuck. I'm George Phillip. I teach 5th and 6th grade world history at the Stanley Clark School in South Bend, Indiana, and excited to get one of these back up and running again. Even though my name tag is backwards.
And I'm Chuck Taft. I teach at University School of Milwaukee as well with Michael. I teach 8th grade American history and social studies department chair, and work a little with Jason outside, or starting to work with Jason outside on doing some fun stuff with technology and teaching.
Hi, I'm Tom Driscoll. I am a social studies teacher in Connecticut, living in Rhode Island.
Hi, I'm David. I teach in Forest Hills, Northern and Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I'm teaching all AP US history this year.
Ooh, all AP?
Yes. I'm currently grading essays.
Nice.
Between comments.
Yes,
All right.
trying to.
Okay. Well, as I was mentioning to Michael, and as George alluded to, we haven't done this for a while, and I accidentally came across Carl Lindgren Stryker's TED Talk, which, by the way, he didn't tell anybody about, at least not me. So I was thinking we should get together and talk about that and whatever else is going on. And maybe he'll show up here later. He's probably signing autographs or something somewhere.
Well, it's dinner time in California. So.
Yeah, good point. So in the meantime, I thought it'd be really neat to hear what everybody's been doing, what's been working well, and then, as Carl said in his TED Talk, we need to be doing something. So what are you doing next? So maybe we can start there. What have you done lately that's gone well, and what are you doing next? And wherever that conversation leads, we can go there. Somebody want to start with something?
I'll start, I guess. Well, I am currently 2 chapters away from being done with the book and getting ready for the AP exam May 8th. Going through all the historical thinking skills that we possibly can know. But at the same time, though, my kids, since the start of 2nd semester, have been working on their final exam project, which is a project with a 5th grade class with Delia Bush, who teaches 5th grade, and my kids are teaching them U.S. history, and they are writing a story about it, and then her kids are going to come visit me sometime in May, and it's just been a fun little project to do, kind of like a 20-time project. Once every couple of weeks, my kids work on it, and they've been interacting with the 5th graders all the time, so it's been fun.
And are you presenting that somewhere or blogging about it and telling people to do it?
We are blogging a little bit. Delia's been doing more of that than I have been. But we are going to, I know Delia will be talking about it at FlipCon this summer, about our little process that we've created. And there's been a few hiccups in the road and bumps, but everything so far has been fairly nice. One app that I used for it was something called MoveNote. It's a Google app that you can just kind of talk over a PowerPoint real quick, and it's easy to use, and the kids have been liking it, and her 5th graders will be making one probably later on for my kids. So
cool.
What is MoveNote exactly? I've heard about it a ton, but I just don't use it. So what is MoveNote?
MoveNote is easiest way to do it is just create a Google presentation, and then you upload it, and it turns it basically into slides. and then you can just talk over it like you're making a video, and you can just advance the slide when you need to. There's no editing function to it at all. It's just quick and simple, and you talk through it and press save, and uploads it and turns it into a URL, and you can just email it and just watch it like a YouTube video.
So it's like a screencasting tool.
Yeah, it's a screencasting tool that's basically as bare bones as you possibly can get.
Okay. Which sometimes is best especially when kids are making them. Just keep it
Yeah,
simple.
because they're like, well, we need to edit this. I'm like, no, you make a mistake. I make mistakes all the time. Just correct it and move on. So it was quick and simple to use. We got it done in a day. So.
Cool.
I was just real quickly. I was listening to Troy Cockrum's podcast. And he was talking to Alice Keeler, and she was talking about how she just loves the Snagit extension for Chrome for doing a lot of the same stuff. It was really interesting. She said she had never used the extension before because she had the full version, but she said that's a pretty nice tool for the Chromebook.
Yeah, it's good, but I've had it crash on me a lot. So I don't know if they're still trying to get but I've had kids try to use it, and sometimes, like, as it's syncing to Google Drive, it just gets stuck syncing, like, over and over and over, and never actually gets there. So that might be a problem with my computers that we have, I don't know, or the network that we have. But that's the only hiccup I've had with the Snagit. But if that could start working, the best part of that, I think, is that it does sync right with your drive. So as soon as you're done getting your screen capture, or the kids do, it just goes right into that TechSmith folder, which is really helpful, especially if you're trying to streamline the process with kids.
Wow, Chuck, how did you add that comment?
I don't know. I just can't type to save my freaking life. It's seven errors in there. Oh my god. I went to the left, and there's a little chat room thing. Top left, there's a blue little chitty chat.
Yeah, I guess I clicked on the wrong thing. I clicked on it on the right. That's why it wasn't there. It came up on your name. I've never seen that before.
Hey, they can put little bubbles
Actually,
in.
Jason, I invented it.
That's the cool thing
morning.
Chuck's done lately.
Yes, I invented the chat on Google Hangouts.
Speaking of inventing things and cool things, and Alice Keeler, she was. This has become the Alex Keeler talk. She was talking about this extension that she had created so that teachers can have something up on their computer and then have their grade book up on their computer at the same time.
Yeah, I downloaded that today.
So did I.
What is it called here? I'm bringing it up here on my computer.
There was like this noise that came out of me when I
Tab
added it, 'cause-
resize is what it's called.
So you're on your student's work and you click her extension and it automatically brings your grade up in another window and you can throw it in the grade book.
What's it called?
Sorry, I misspoke. Tab resize does something else. In that same post, she talked about the one Jason's talking about. I didn't download that one.
You just go to the Chrome Web Store and type in Alice Keeler, and two things will come up, and you pick the one that has a gradebook component.
Now, Chuck, tab resize is still awesome.
That's very cool.
It just does something different than what he just said.
Yeah, but I was all jazzed up, so.
Yeah, but tab resize is better. Also in Alice Keeler's post, so if we need to give credit where credit's due, it's fantastic.
Well,
that
damn
one,
you, Alice Keeler.
It allows you to resize your screen, like it'll take your tabs and cut them, either half and half, like Jason's saying, or you can go half and half, top to bottom, or it could split your screen into 4 squares if you needed it.
So we're only a couple minutes in and we're already talking technology.
That's true. If we want to go back to history, one of the things I'm working on with my students before we left for our spring break, I sort of launched our big Rome project, and it's my typical Rome unit. They end up having to do some research, and I've had them write papers some years. I've had them give speeches some years. What I changed about it this year, they're going to still do those things, but instead of giving them, I used to give them kind of a list of topics that they could choose between, and this year I gave them a list, but I said that can't be your project though. Like, I equated it to sort of surfing the web. That's where you're going to start your research, and from there click something else, and from there click something else, and when you find something that sort of captivates you, that probably will captivate other sixth graders, so that's what you should do your project on. And I said that this is going to really frustrate you because many of my sixth grade students kind of want to just get started. They want to like read the thing about whatever their topic is and start writing their paper or start making their speech. And this really flips it on its head. I said the hardest part of this entire project will be choosing your topic. Once that clicks in, then you're all experienced in terms of writing one of these papers or giving a speech. It's the finding that topic that's going to be difficult. And when kids, we launched this just before break, and the kids, we had like one day to kind of work on it, and it seemed really intriguing. The kids were really going to Wikipedia and kind of clicking the links and seeing where it took them, and it was really, I think, kind of a neat way to do a project in a way I have not done prior.
And so what are they coming up with the next
like,
step for them?
Like one example would be if a kid went to, so let's say they had the city of Athens was one of their topic starting points. From there, they're reading about Athens, and then they find out about the Danelian League. They click that link on Wikipedia. Then they're reading about the Danelian League. Then they find out about the island of Delos and how it's guarded and how money came in and out. And one kid found that fascinating, and we didn't really talk too much about that when we studied Greece at all. We talked about this alliance, but we didn't really talk about the island and how money came in and out and how they collected this money. So this guy's entire project now is about this very tiny subset that has really a good story to it that I didn't really know, as opposed to just doing, again, just a traditional paper on the city of Athens or about one of the gods. Like now that you cut out all that normal, easy stuff, and they have to kind of dig deeper, which for sixth graders, they typically like to just do the normal, easy stuff. Let me do a paper on Athens. Let me do a speech on Zeus,
Do you tie it back then to the bigger picture, or you just leave it where it's at?
In this particular unit, they don't. In this particular unit, they just have to kind of share out what they learned, in sort of a meaningful fashion. But my students could choose a track. So the standard track, they get to share their knowledge. They have to teach the class in any which way they want. If they want to write a paper, they can write the paper, and I will read it and grade it. But they are required to sort of stand up and sort of say a little bit about what they found. If they want to make something, physically make something, that's cool. I will grade that as well. You do have to still stand up and sort of show it to the class. If you want to give a speech, well, then I will be grading you on how you present. But they could choose. And then the advanced track that they can opt into, the challenge track, they are required to give a speech. So their project, their end product, is we're calling it like TEDx Ancient, and they're going to be doing little ancient TED Talks.
Now, I have a question for you about that. So you're moving towards a standard-based system, right? From what I remember.
That's what I'm like looking into for next year, yeah.
Now, the trouble that I've had is when I've thought about this whole idea of like an advanced track versus lower tracks and all that, is where, when I'm trying to design an incentive system why the kids should take the advanced track and what they get out of it. Because the way that my administration's been pushing me is that, like, all right, well, the kids that are doing better, just give them harder stuff type thing, or give them more advanced standards.
Sure.
And I was like, yeah, that makes sense, but there has to be something built in so that they get either like more credit for it, or they get a GPA bump because they're in high school at least, or just something, because I just know a lot of kids, it's like their reward for doing well is like more and harder stuff, and they're like, what the hell, So it's like a lot of times you'll actually see kids making sure they don't really put themselves out there that much, just so that they don't get more stuff thrown at them. So how do you combat that, especially in middle school? Because you're middle school, right? For the most part? Yeah. So like, how do you combat that part with the kids that they may be resistant to do more?
Before Michael gives a legitimate answer to that, can I just get on a soapbox for a minute and say that, you know, it's the same argument I'm having about professional development. If we want people to do something, do we give them $50 or do we give them something that they actually want? You know, maybe $50 is a lot, but for most people, it's you know, Daniel Pink, autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So how can we give them more autonomy, more mastery opportunities, and more opportunities to find purpose for what they're doing? And so that's what I would say is, instead of giving them harder tasks, give them more autonomy to do what they want to do. Give them a reason to show up every day, some purpose, and let them be masters of whatever the thing in Greece they like is, or whatever it is they're studying. Okay, jumping off the soapbox, Michael, over to you.
I like now I want to add to what you said though, but so Tom, I think you know, right? So I gamify my class, and I would say that that's one way that I do it. What I've experimented with this year in my gamification is on that challenge track versus regular track. It's not just about badges or stars or points. What I've tried to position it, I actually call it the adventure path. I've wrapped it into my storyline, so when kids are into my sort of game system, there is kind of they're almost seeing the challenge as more fun, right? Like, I want to go do this thing, or some kids said the other day, you know, I've gone on every adventure path, so I'm really excited to learn what the adventure path is in this. And the adventure path, by and large, for the most part, is exactly what you described. It's more challenging in some way, but in that gamified model, there are some reasons why they want to go on it. For that personal pride point, like a lot of intrinsic reasons, as well as some extrinsic. But I think the gamification helps launch that and launch that idea, because I think the first unit when I did the challenge track or the adventure path, you know, I did not have a lot of students go on it, and each unit more and more started going on it. And on this particular unit, it was kind of cool. I teach 4 sections of this, and in 3 of the sections, when I'm telling them about this path that they could go on, this adventure path, in 3 of the 4 classes, other kids said, could we hear from the kids that have done the adventure path in the previous units, you know? And I was like, sure. So then I kind of gave the class over to them, and all the kids that went on these previous adventure paths started speaking about what they got out of the adventure path, how it made them more challenged. They were proud of what they did. They found it exciting to, you know, like, explore and do these different things. And it was kind of cool to see students really want to learn from those other students what they did, and this would be my unit that I had the highest rate of participation in. I think my challenge track, I have about 60% of the grade doing that. And there is no grade benefit to it.
Yeah. But you give those kids more autonomy if they go down that path.
It depends, but yeah, I mean, I guess. My China unit, I gave them a ton of autonomy. My China unit, I made it like an independent self-study. Like, if you go on this adventure path, this whole thing's already laid out for you, and you're going to go do that. Or you can stay with me, and I will chunk out the curriculum and do it like normal.
Tom, I tried to do something like that when we were studying ideology, where students have to learn stuff. They have a couple different ways they can learn the content, and then they come and they prove to me that they know it. We have a conversation about it. I ask them some questions, and so they have a certain number of learning objectives that they have to show that they know. And some of them, you know, a couple of them were all over that, and it was like, okay, what's next? We got this. It was a day or two, and they were done. And then some others, it was 5 days later, and they were still working and trying to figure out, you know, where they go to get the information. And so what I did is I tried to but I didn't do it very well. I tried to make it a situation where if you're finished with this, then you can do this other thing, which I toyed with the idea of social media interns, because all my students are on their phone always, and so I said, well, why don't we make it about us instead of just about you? And so I started having them research what that would look like and come up with some best practices and stuff like that. I should have probably given them that and let them go with the fun part, of taking pictures and tweeting out what what other students are doing. The other part, we had a technical issue because we have Facebook, we just can't access it, and we have Twitter, but we can't access it. So we couldn't figure out exactly what platform to use. But the idea is there that, okay, you've done all this stuff, you know the content, you've developed the skills, now what else can we get you to do that you want to do and contribute to?
Back on your point, Jason, about the autonomy, mastery, there's a teacher at the Punahana School, Douglas Kian, who I heard speak, and I have not done this in my class, but it sounded, I think, intriguing. He talks about having students choose a major in your class and a minor in your class and kind of give them autonomy of those things. So figure out skills in your class that are repeatable. So standard-based grading, are there some repeatable things that you're going to talk about? Are you going to, every unit, look at the economics of something? Every unit, are you going to look at the cultural aspects? If that's true, then kids could choose that as a major or as a minor, and then each unit they have the autonomy to become sort of experts in that. You're not going to cover the economy as well as those kids that chose that as their major. So you're going to do your kind of broad stroke unit, and then the kids that chose that are going to really dive deep into it. And then he talked about the minor being there in case a kid kind of wears out, like, I don't really want to study the economy of China, I've done it for Mesopotamia, I did it for Egypt, I'm kind of sick of it. Okay, well then, what was the minor you picked? Focus on that for this unit. I thought that was a really intriguing concept. Like I said, I haven't done it at all.
That might be a great idea for those military geeks that you have, the military channel kids that you have all the time. David, I'm sure you have them in your U.S. in 11th grade, where you can't go into all the details of every battle, and I'd love to, because I love that stuff. But that's a great idea, Mikey, when it comes to, unfortunately, when you talk about U.S. history, there's a whole lot of wars going on. But that can feed the fuel the fire of those kids that want to, they really want to dig into, the trenches or the Civil War battles or anything going on in either theater in World War II. Yet you can't, I don't like the term, but you can't cover it necessarily all in class. That's kind of it's a pretty nifty idea. I like that.
Well, in AP, we don't even cover the wars, basically. And I don't even touch them, to be honest with you.
But you've got those kids, and they're mostly guys who are, they're just jacked up on the.
I always tell them about the military history class in college. Go take it, you'll get it there, because I just don't have time to cover it.
They don't put any of that on the test?
No, there's nothing about wars on the AP exam. It's all about how we got to the war and the outcome of the war, but nothing about military strategy or anything like that at all.
They skip those 4 years.
Yeah.
Or they just do the home front, right? Or the
policies. Yeah, we'll do the home front. We'll do policies. I mentioned the Battle of Gettysburg. I mentioned D-Day. I mentioned Pearl Harbor, the Battle of the Bulge. But that's about it. I mean, we don't go in depth about why they happened, where they happened at, or the outcome of a single battle, because that just means not a whole lot in my world.
Mm-hmm. AP, the new Spark Notes.
Exactly.
That's trademark George Phillip, by the way.
Yeah.
David, sometimes I feel the same way. It's like there's some stuff in AP government that we don't talk about, and I feel like, well, how do you get out of a government class and not have heard this or not know about this? And it sounds like the same thing. How do you get out of an AP US class and not know everything there is to know about D-Day. You know.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, we cover such in-depth things, and like, I don't care. We don't worry about dates a whole lot, but I feel like my final exam every year should just be like basic knowledge of U.S. history, because sometimes like the easy stuff is what the kids don't get. It's the in-depth stuff that they excel on. But it's like, hey, who was the third president? And they don't have a clue.
But they
know
can name
everything.
Owner's belief in Reconstruction, and
Yeah,
because that's on the test and that's the text, right?
exactly. But the basic things, like, they don't know Lincoln's the 16th president, but they know everything about Lincoln did and why he was so significant. But being the 16th president doesn't really matter. Not that it matters, anyways.
Yeah, no, you're right.
I just
go ahead, Mike.
we just finished Wisconsin Council of Social Studies conference at the start of my break, and as a world history teacher, like, there's always something you got to cut, right? Like, there's a bajillion years of history of every culture. But there, somebody shared with me a book to read, so I read it over break. It's This Fleeting World, and it's really a neat model to look at for teaching world history. And it sounds similar to, I guess, how you're teaching U.S. history, like a little more broad strokes, a little less zoomed in.
Yeah.
But I know, George, you teach world history, so
I do.
check it out.
Some days.
It's an interesting read.
What's the name of it again?
This Fleeting World. It's a short book, but his general premise is world history shouldn't be a study of individual cultures. That, like, about, what's different about Greece, now what's different about Egypt, what's different about. He's talking about it would be a much more compelling class and useful class and relevant class if you're talking about the story of humanity. Like, how are we all the same? We're all humans.
Is that by David Christensen?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. I started this year using his Big History Project stuff with my sixth graders because I thought it was a lot more fascinating that it wasn't, compartmentalized. You only looked at the Mesopotamians, you only looked at the Egyptians, you only looked at the Greeks. It was, when you talk about the theme of agriculture, or what do they call it? In Big History, they call it thresholds. So, like, this is the threshold of agriculture. So you look at agriculture that happened all around the world at the same time. Why is it that, like, the Mayans and the Incans had the same types of principles of farming and agriculture that the Mesopotamians had at a different time, 3,000 some miles away from them? Why is it that all these civilizations start having all of the same things come up within them? So,
Yeah, like I said, I think it's an interesting perspective to look for similarities as opposed to differences. And he always relates it back to present day, because he's talking about these change agents, these change factors. And when you read the book and he talks about what those all are, they're the same factors that we have today, and they're the same. Arguably, he makes a good case that we're on another threshold. And it's an interesting question to toy with the students in every unit, like what we just studied. How might that impact that next threshold?
Yeah.
Somebody else have something they want to share that's been working? Otherwise, I can throw my 2 cents in there.
Well, I was going to jump in with maybe get a little feedback, too, about what I'm trying to do with the New Deal and the Depression coming up. We've been on spring break for, Michael and I get 2 weeks. We're a couple of the fortunate ones. And so Monday coming back, we're going to crash the stock market and then do the do Life in the Depression and the New Deal. And my essential questions are, and it's not really essential. The first one is, what were the causes and effects of the Depression? And the second one is, was the New Deal a positive step for American society? And I've been influenced by the C3 framework a lot lately to try to get away from everybody doing the same content and everybody having to know a whole lot of content, which has always been hard for me because I love my content. But I put in the little chat what I was thinking for my assessment for the Depression and the New Deal, and I don't want a pen and paper test. They've taken 4 pen and paper tests for me. I think I'm kind of done with those. They, I can tell each student, I can get their grade on the test within, usually a plus or a minus before they even put the pen in the paper. So it's kind of a waste of time. So I was thinking of doing, just to make sure they have a basic mastery of the content, an online one, which I've done before. Do a debate for the New Deal being a positive or negative step.
Are we being invaded?
Those aren't my invaders. That might be Mikey. I was going to do, and then also I put a link to something I've done for the last couple years, but I wanted to focus on it more, which was a creative project, a federal project #1. I kind of like the idea because it was one of the New Deal projects anyways. The arts projects, and so having kids choose something that they want answered about the New Deal, but do it through art, music, drama, photography. Had kids do Instagram, which is pretty cool. So I was just wondering if there's some feedback about that. What anybody thinks about any of those ideas.
It's pretty extensive.
I'm all about project-based learning in my class. I mean, I barely have my kids take tests. Usually only when forced upon by the final exams at the end of the year. But I think anything that you can get them to think outside of the box when it comes to content and how to apply content in new ways is, because that's what they're going to need when they leave us. They're not going to need to know how to take a pen and paper test. They can figure that stuff out. They're smart kids. But that's kind of everything I do is always based around like the end project, the end goal. What do I have in mind?
Yeah, and George, that's kind of where I was going with it too. I mean, and I've done most of these things before, but I kind of want to approach it at the very start by telling the kids, hey, you know what? There is no test on this because you don't really need a test. It's one of the first readings is why should we study about the Depression and the New Deal, and have them make the connections to the modern time. One of the questions I'd love to bounce off you guys too is I've done alphabet soup, those fun, crazy New Deal programs a bunch of different ways, and I've done them as a rap before. Each kid creates one and we do a montage of rap. I've done them as I had them being built out of Legos last year, which actually was pretty cool. I got that idea from Quinn Rollins in Utah. But the other, my other idea was, in kind of stealing from, the time of the year, was doing a bracket of New Deal programs and saying, either which one was the most influential or which one was the worst. Trying to get to that essential question of the positives and negatives. So has anybody done a bracket before? Or I did one like a long time ago about the presidents, and that ends up being whoever gets Lincoln and Washington or whoever everybody likes. So has anybody thrown one of those out there, and any thoughts on that?
Do a vice presidential bracket.
Yeah, well, then it would be John Adams. Not Dick Cheney.
We just did a bracket, excuse me. We just accidentally fell into it. And I'm not sure if it relates to what you were talking about, but we did a competitive situation where, excuse me, I actually got the idea from a guy on Twitter. I saw a picture of his students, 2 kids holding a sign that said, "Ask me about," and so I tweeted at him and asked him about what that was about, and I assumed it was something to do with current events. And he sent me a bunch of information via email, and so I took that and made it into a current events thing. So it was like a who, what, where, when, why, how. Every student got one, shared it with them on Google, Doctopus, and they had to fill it out the first time through on a news story that they picked, and then they had to create something on their Chromebook using S'more or Pictochart or Canva. Most of them chose Canva, and what they did is it said "Ask me about," and then it was the name of their story, or something about their story, and then they took their Chromebooks and turned them around. So I had half the class in the middle, back to back, with their Chromebooks turned around, and the other half circling around and asking about. And the first time through, we kept track of how many people got asked, and that was kind of the warm-up. And the second time through, this is when we sort of fell into the bracket. I put them into teams of 4, with back-to-back in the teams of 4. And then they had to pick a name. They could either pick a UW system school or they could pick an Ivy League school, so then they had to go and do some research. And then everybody in their group picked a new story, and everybody in their group had to create a little marketing thing. And I think the best part is that they have to turn their Chromebooks around, so they can't read it now, right? They have to know the story. And then we had a number 1 seed, so they got a bye in the first round. They were the judges. So they went around and they asked everybody about their stories, and then they got to vote. And so we had seven teams. Number 1 seed got a bye. They were the judges. They picked who went on. So 3 teams moved on. Now the number 1 seed was back in it, so they had to have something too. And then everybody who got kicked out, they were the judges. So for about 2 days, we had students researching current events, or I call them significant events because every current event is not significant. So they're researching significant events, then they're creating something, they're doing some marketing, so that's a skill. Ask me about. And then they had to talk with their classmates. We did a very quick introduction to how to ask someone a question, so you don't just walk up and stand there and expect them to start telling you about their story. You have to actually, communicate with them. And then they had to decide who did the best job. Greatest part was that they became a team, and the first day as we started the process, I asked one kid about his story as he was researching and putting it all together, and he couldn't tell me too much about it. I came back the second day. I thought I was going to catch him again because I said, you need to know this stuff, and he knew everything. I could not ask him a question because he nailed it. And I asked his group about that, or I actually told them about it, and they're like, yeah, we grilled them on it. So they became a team. They were helping each other out, and they actually learned the stuff. The bracket just became a little competitive thing that they were doing on the side. But it was, a useful addition. And then, of course, they asked, what do we get if we win? So I let them decide. Turns out they got a traveling trophy, a little old thing I got for free from Craigslist, and then the cookies. They like cookies, and then a retweet. So they're fascinated by the number of followers I have, so they want me to retweet one of their tweets. So that's what they won. I don't know if that helps with your bracket question, Chuck, but that's the way we did it. Competitive, talking, communication.
Jason, did you have kids take notes on it, the other kids, or were they just kind of...
No, but that's what we'll do next time. The first time it was a run-through. The second time it was more competitive, and the next time... and that's what students ask me, too. Do we have to take notes on this? Should we be writing this down?
And then how about did they have to, say they advance, you get out of the first round or whatever they advance, did they have to, were there requirements about, did they have to do something new? Do they have to say something additional? They can't just go with, can they just go with the same old? Can that be factored into the voting?
Yeah, those would be good things to add. Actually, they said, why do we have to go hear it again? Why do we have to go say it again? And I said, well, because if you make it to the next round, you don't just say, hey, did you guys see my last game? You have to do it again, right? But we stuck with the same stories, but we could do a new story. It would take longer because you sort of have to start over.
Well, I'm just thinking about doing. I mean, to be honest, who gives a rip about all these New Deal programs? Honestly, it's like it's watching paint dry, and David, are the New Deal programs on the AP test?
Oh.
I mean, the programs themselves, the ideas probably are, but...
The ideas are, but not the exact programs. And plus, AP completely changes here, so I don't exactly know what's on the test, to be honest with you.
But I'm just thinking, if I have 8 programs and can do You know, just make it competitive and do some brackets. Think about wagering too.
Oh, totally.
You know,
That
have
would
some
totally
kids
work.
have some kids fill out a bracket ahead of time
Yeah.
and seed them and
Yeah, I would say if you could do it less about which is the best, program and more about who's got a good explanation. Because, like I said, what we did, and I know David had to go, what we did was the competition was based on who had the best visual to entice you in and who had the best explanation of the stories. And students got to vote about that. So it was, you know, it didn't matter if you did it one way or the other. The bottom line was they were talking for 2 days about content, talking
right.
2 days about stories, and asking each other questions. And
What if this is just me making this up on the spot? So cut me off whenever you want. But
Okay, you're done.
what about like you use the bracket and oh man, I should not have led with that.
popcorn. Finish
Uh,
the sentence, George.
You
So what if
start
you
with
start
the
with-
bracket. No.
Start with the bracket, and what if you put the kids in teams of like 3 or 4, and 2? You want teams of 2?
Just because of the number. I'm just thinking of the number.
No. That
8
wouldn't work.
programs.
That wouldn't work with my idea. Well, but like, you don't need them to do all the programs if there's going to be a bracket. Well, I mean, my point is you wouldn't need them to do all the programs round 1 for the bracket. So my point was have kids in teams of 4, and what if you did like a little micro, if you will, like trial, like put one of these programs on trial, and one would have to be the lawyer, sort of explaining the program. One would have to explain your counterpoint, like was it a good deal for America? So one would be the other lawyer, right, the opposing lawyer. Maybe the 2 other people in the group would be like the witnesses they would get to ask questions to. So the whole team would have to research to kind of do that role play, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone else in the crowd has to decide did they, win the bracket against one of the other teams. So the other teams put in one of the other programs up. If that team advances, then they play somebody else doing a whole new program.
How about this, Mikey? Instead of a trial, how about it's like a game, but you play offense and defense?
Okay. Sounds good.
Right.
Are there 3-pointers?
What's that?
Are there 3-pointers?
No, if it's an old game, the 3-point line didn't come until the 50s, right? So
Right.
to make it authentic, you
Okay,
gotta.
you guys are done. You guys are
Yeah,
done.
show up with
all you guys.
baskets.
Early 80s. No, I like that. I think, that ends up turning into a mini debate.
Yeah, I just thought I liked the idea. I don't know. I liked the idea of the courtroom because I liked you'd have one opposing counsel, right, and then one lawyer, and then I liked you'd have these 2 witnesses that would have to be prepped on the topic, right, because you're going to be asking them questions, and those questions then have to tell the story of the program. And really, all 4 of them are working in concert. Really, like they're not competitive with each other. They're actually, it's almost like you're putting on a mini play. Like these guys would have to really construct the whole thing together. And it's going to be, it would actually be the opposite of a debate because it's a whole stage thing. You and the opposing counsel are working together.
Yeah, I've done the New Deal on trial. I put that on trial with FDR as the defendant. But that's more of a scripted, as opposed to kids creating it. All right, I got some ideas. Thank you. That's cool.
Make it a musical. Singing. You should sing.
I have a great voice.
Very good. Does anybody have any questions? Other questions? Things going forward that you're thinking about?
Well, I was gonna say my kids, in 6th grade, we're getting ready to do like our kind of wrap-up project for the year, and I've been doing a lot of looking and playing around with design thinking, because actually at the last Isaacs conference that I went to, and Isaacs is like which I know Michael and Chuck will know what Isaacs is, but it's like our regional kind of group that accreditates our types of schools. They actually had some people from the Stanford D School there to talk to us about design thinking and stuff, and come to find out one of the presenters actually went to my school as a student, so that was kind of really cool to kind of reconnect with her. But they talk a lot about empathy and how to build an empathy, and if you read through any of the books that are out there, talk to any of the big people that are out there, they say the number one thing that most of our employees need to know is empathy and how to empathize with others. So my end of year project for my sixth graders is they kind of get to take a look at an Asian country of their choosing and focus on some different global issues that face them to kind of play off of the ancient civilizations and how they dealt with problems and how they were innovative for their time, and now look to today. How can we be innovative in that time? And so to kind of build up that empathy, they're doing like a cultural study right now of an Asian country of their choosing in groups, so they can kind of get a feel better for what culture was like there. Because last year we didn't really have anything, and a lot of the stuff that they were trying to do were like American ideas, like, oh, I'll just build this house bigger. You can't really do that in Haiti. What kind of supplies are you able to have? Things like that. Well, I don't know. Well, did you research it? No. So that's kind of the end of the year. We do all sorts of large projects like that in 5th and 6th grade. So that's kind of how my year is going to wrap up. I actually only have like 6 weeks of school left, 7 weeks of school left after my spring break starts next week. So it's winding down fast.
Mm-hmm. So that sounds like an interesting process that you're going through. Anybody else have anything? I think our hour is coming up, or it's already gone. I'm not quite sure. But if anybody has anything else.
Yeah, one thing that happened this week, actually, it's actually happened yesterday, is our superintendent just approved to have me and my department move to competency-based credit in the high school. So basically, it's mastery learning with teeth to it, which I've been fighting for 4 years. And it's funny because we finally got it, but now I'm like, oh crap, I gotta get my spit together here, because the big thing is, like, now I have to really nail down what are the competencies for each course, like really nail it down, and then make sure that my assessments are rock solid. Because if now I'm all of a sudden going to tell a kid you cannot get credit for this course until you master every competency, I better make sure that they're good. And I better make sure that those assessments are valid, So really I've been doubling down the past couple months on trying to figure out how this all works. But I think the thing that I realized more than anything is that the way that I had it set up was kind of wrong, where I originally had it set up where, say I designated 20 standards or competencies for a semester. I would have that standard, I would have some formative assessments and resources, then I have an assessment for each individual one. And it's taking so long for the kids to get through, and it's not very efficient. So something that I've started to move towards is kind of more what George, what you do with the project-based learning, where what I do is I have some resources and some introductory activities, but I don't grade any of it. It's just to kind of prep them. And now what I move to is, like particularly this unit, is we have a raft assignment. I don't know if you guys have done those before. It's just like a differentiated project, but it's tagged to 5 different standards in the course. So it might take them longer, but those competencies are being built and demonstrated through a bigger project. And I think that that's a better way that I want to go next year. So what I'm considering doing is designing the course as more of a project-based course, which is weird because you think like mastery and project-based don't really go together, but I think they do, because if you set it up right, where you say, all right, you have to master these competencies, but they may be through this one project. Like, I don't see the two things as mutually exclusive. I think they can work together.
No,
but, so you can jump in, George, at any time.
Oh, I don't think they're mutually exclusive, and I also think at the same time, students are going to get more out of it than if it's like if it's a mastery course where it's just like tests and quizzes and labs, if it's in a science class. Whereas if they're actually having to apply that information that they're learning into
Yeah.
something that's more physical and meaningful,
Yeah.
then they're going to get more out of it.
Absolutely. So what me and Brian have done, Brian Germain's the guy that works with me that does a lot of similar stuff. We're going to say everything has to be through some type of performance assessment. Like you cannot master standard through like a Flu-Brew quiz or something. You know, like that doesn't cut it as far as mastering a skill. Like that could be a lead up to it, but what I realized is how hard it is to develop a good performance assessment, and one that has like a solid rubric that really measures the skills. So I almost feel like what I'm going to have to do is in preparation for next year is really dive into a lot of the research and what is a worthy competency to measure, and then how do you measure it accurately. So for instance, a lot of my content-based stuff, I'm considering just throwing it out and tagging content to certain skill stuff. But for instance, like if I made a competency like demonstrate an understanding of major events in the Cold War, I don't think that's a good competency to develop for my course, because I just feel like it's too content heavy, and is that really something that they could then move on with, like as a skill? So that's kind of where I'm at, is like I'm glad that we're moving towards this, but in a way I'm almost like, all right, I got to really make sure that I got this down. Especially if I'm keeping kids from moving through high school. Because the way it works now is, starting next year, any kid in any social studies class, 9th, 10th, 11th, they're going to have that set of competencies. And once they're done with all of them for the course, they move on to the next course regardless of any seat time. It could be in December, it could be in June, it could be a year and a half from now, from when they start. So we just got to make sure that it's set up correctly. So any feedback or advice that you guys have related to that is much appreciated.
Well, as a teacher and as a social studies teacher, I think there are two things that are important there. Maybe the third one too, but content's important. We have to have content and we have to have skills. And so if we can assess them, performance based on both of those things, I think that's an important thing. But we can't just have automatons that can, find the main idea and can, put things in historical context on a timeline. We don't want that. We want people who have a broad range of, thoughts and experiences that they're aware of, and we want them to be able to think deep on those things. But in order to do that, they have to have content. You can't compare and contrast and do all those things unless you know something about what happened, and at least you understand how it's connected. So you've got to have some content. Otherwise, we're going to have a bunch of stuff about, dinosaurs and
Skateboards.
Skateboards.
Tom, have you looked at the C3 framework much?
I haven't yet. That's the next layer for me.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, we started out with Common Core, and then we're starting to weave in the Connecticut social studies frameworks, and I think the Connecticut social studies ones are similar to the C3. But here's what my idea was: is having, I don't know how feasible this is, but have you guys heard of Summit Schools out in California?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm thinking of trying a similar model where a lot of the flipped content or a lot of the blended learning stuff that they could access remotely would be content based, and it would be simply like, did you do it or not? Just like, I'm not putting that into the grade book, but these are the steps that you need to take to access the performance assessment. You know what I mean? So like, you might have to write a summary or do some vocab or do a couple readings, and once you complete those things, like just doing them, then that would, in a way, like unlock the assessment, so then they can get to the performance assessment, and that's how they would demonstrate their proficiency in the standard. So that way they would still get the content ahead of time, but I'm not like grading whether or not they knew every fact of the era. They just need to get an understanding of it, but then they would demonstrate proficiency in the standards later in the performance assessment. But then the problem that I'm thinking of too is like, if the kids say, oh well, if I'm not getting grading on this, and this isn't part of the actual skill you're assessing for the course for the credit, why am I going to do it? You know, so I'm almost thinking like I'm going to have to like require some things that you have to do. Maybe I give them choice. Maybe say out of these 10 things, you got to do 5 content building things to unlock the performance assessment. But at least having some requirement that they have to engage with it on some level before they move on to that project.
Sounds like an easy gamification, right, Michael?
Yeah.
I'm always going to think in that way. Yeah.
No, I mean really, it's like it's almost you got to earn these badges, or you've got to, you know, I hate to say it, you got to jump through these hoops, or you've got to, you know, you've got to demonstrate proficiency in this so that you can go to the next level, and that's where the grade is. And if they don't, you know, and that kind of takes care of the kids who are worried about, well, I want the grade, I want the grade, I want the grade. The kids who are worried about, well, I want to learn, I want to dig into this. Well, they're gonna jump through the hoop no matter what.
Tom, our social study, or our middle school teachers have something that's called Project I, and it's project based, but they have some type of a computer program gradebook thing that has a whole bunch of standards already input into it, and so the students have to come up with a project, and they have to present it to, they don't call them teachers, call them advisors. They have to present it to them and tell them what standards it's going to hit when they've finished with it. So they have to like do their pitch, and they have to get approval, and then from there, the teachers can go into that grade program. They can, you know, over the course of the 2 years that they're in the program, they can, you know, click off the ones that that they've mastered. That's what I was thinking about when you were talking about the way that you do it. You might want to look into that program.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. And I think, Mike, when you sent out that information about how you wanted to set up your standards and how they could hit them at all different points, because a lot of these things come up from, I was thinking about that and saying, like, look, instead of having like a designated set of competencies for each unit, just saying, all right, these are all of them for the whole year. And regardless of what topic we're doing, you could hit any of them. But I'm just wondering, like, from a management standpoint and from the kids figuring out what the hell they're supposed to be doing, is that going to be too much for them to handle on their own? I mean, what are you guys' thoughts on that?
I haven't gotten over that hump yet myself, but that is still the path that I'm on. I like this idea of having, I haven't finished my standards yet, or my goals, but you know, like you said, having 20 a semester, 40 overall, maybe trying to parse that out and say, you know, we're going to, on any given project, you can hit 4 standards. Tell me what 4 you're going for. So coming up with maybe like an application process that would kind of help outline their thinking, like, I'm going to do a project on the New Deal, but I think by doing that, I'm going to really try to stress this skill, and this skill. I also like it on the, I don't know, again, going with gamification, I like the idea that you're giving them meaningful choices over their immediate task. So as opposed to a traditional class where you're saying we are studying the wars right now, because that's what we're studying, and you know, some of your students don't care, now you're giving them that agency where they can say, well, for my project, I really want to focus on geography. And you know, I haven't done it really yet this year, and so I'm going to spend more time on geography for our final project or assessment here and hit 3 or 4 of those geography standards. Or some other kid could mix it up. You know, I'm going to hit 1 geography standard and 1 economic standard during this project. And then thirdly, I like the idea of them slowly, I don't know if you want to say, you are slowly limiting their choices, because once they've mastered it, they need to select new skills. And I also like that idea of, you know, think about what you're doing. You know, sometimes don't only grab the low-hanging fruit in the first quarter because it's easy. Realize you may paint yourself in a corner where you're going to have 5 standards that you're going to have a hard time gelling into one project. But then where it sort of falls apart for me is, how do you allow them to reassess? Like you said, I feel like to manage it, I'd have to be giving them opportunities for mastery, like all the time, so that I could tell a kid on their project, if I'm going to let them do 4 projects a year or whatever, or 8 projects a year to get up to 40, then there's no chance that they could ever fix. Like if I score them a 2 on a standard, then they're a 2 on a standard, which isn't the way standard-based grading is supposed to be. I'm supposed to give them multiple opportunities. You know how.
What if they could just have unlimited revisions on it and just fix it till it gets to a 3 or 4?
But how do you do that if, like, what if the method to show that? What if the project is a speech? Am I going to continue to give them unlimited 5-minute windows throughout the rest of the year?
Well, yeah, the next content topic they give a speech, and if the next speech is better than the last one, then they've mastered that skill.
Right, but what if the skill they were demonstrating was geography? So while they're doing their speech, they're showing all about the geography for whatever unit, and they're hitting my geography standard, and in the end they did a poor job on it, so I say, you didn't really sell me on the fact that you know that standard, so you're a 2, you're developing in it, whatever the rubric says, and when do I give them that chance,
Well, that's what I'm saying. The next bit of content is it better include that geography thing to show that you have done better at it now.
I could do that if we lifted the limit of, like I said, saying that you could only hit 4 some standards in a particular project or 5 some standards in a particular project. The reason I put the limit on there is because I'm afraid, at least in my 6th grader's mind, some kid's going to try to bang out, like, I'm just going to do 20 of them. And look, and they'll try to point out, like, see, I showed a map, so I clearly my geography, check. It had a capital on there, check.
Well, maybe the limit is for those who, haven't tried it, or if you can add a 5th one if you
it's
got 2 or below in a previous assessment.
Would it be possible, and I don't know, Tom, if this is the direction you're thinking about, but if in your first semester, trimester, or whatever, that you yourself demonstrate every major standard, or have the kids do every major standard in a smaller application or way or something like that, and then for 2nd, 3rd, and 4th quarter, if you do that 1st quarter, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th quarter, they then have that checklist or whatever you want to call it, and they can start to pick and choose. And as Michael said, they have a little more agency with it. They have a little more choice. I'm not. It would put a lot of the onus on you in that 1st quarter, but then after that 1st quarter or whatever, the 1st unit or 1st session or whatever, they can go with it. Because my worry would be if you give a list to kids and say, I want you to be able to explain how geography played a very important role in some component of American history, I'll say, from my perspective. And some kid just throws up a map and says, well, hey, take a look, here's a map, this is geography. And that's not really what you want to do. You can kind of give them the idea and still present some content, and then after that, they should have sort of a toolbox. For a sports analogy, it's like you give them, here's a whole bunch of offenses that you can run when you're playing basketball. And then the rest of the time is, here's the game, you got to run all these offenses, figure it out.
Yeah. I mean, I think along those lines, my goal is that by the time next year starts, I want to try to create flipped videos that model a proficient piece of evidence. So they're going to have that with them, and then the rubrics are also going to be for every criteria. Like, they're going to know that just throwing a map on a project is not going to hit that standard. Like, it's going to be crystal clear. But how do I, and for me it's crystal clear, but how do I communicate to the kids? And that's the big thing is, I can throw a bunch of rubrics together, but you damn well know the kids don't read those things unless you go through it with them. So I'm going to have to create a process of, like you said, maybe have them go through them before they even engage in the project, or have some type of lesson that we go through it. But I think,
along those lines, how do you foster inquiry and some authentic learning, so it doesn't just become a checkbox and that's what learning becomes for those students.
Well, I think that's why the performance assessment is going to be where they have a lot of freedom to choose and to do those types of things. You know, for instance, like the raft assignment, it's something I haven't done before, but Brian actually showed it to me. I'll paste it in here. But I mean, I am no math person, but if I did the combinations, there might be 10,000 ways you could do this assignment. So, I mean, we are giving them choice here.
10,000, but we're no math teachers, so.
Yeah, like, I mean, you guys can take my word for it.
Like more like 2.
So, like, for instance, the role, I think we have 1, 2, I mean, maybe 20. So they can choose any role they want, any audience they want to write to, any format they want, and any topic they want. You know, so they can choose all of that. And then there's 6 different standards aligned to it. And what we're going to do is build in, like, what is a proficient craft and structure of your project look like? What is proficient research and presentation look like? And go through that with them.
You start with this, or where does this show up?
This raft project. So basically, in this unit, like, we'll just do 2 basic ones. I call them understanding the error choice menus. So, like, for instance, if the goal is, like, in this one, actually, I'll even share in the draft of my standards just so you can get a better idea of what I'm going with this. But the first 2 standards of this particular unit on World War II are just getting the content there, like, you know, understanding the rise of Nazi Germany in World War II, and then, like, you know, the course of events that happened there, and they can choose whether to do, you know, this is a typical choice menu of differentiated learning, but that kind of sets them up with the content. And then after that, so right now, like, we're in the World War II, so we're doing standards 9, 10, 11 from the semester. So the standards 9 and 10 are just the content-heavy ones, where they just have to demonstrate an understanding of what happened, and then they dive into this World War II raft project. And this is where they're going to have choice, but they also have to demonstrate proficiency of those standards. And, you know, I think what's happening is that a lot of the kids, they just want me to tell them exactly what to put in to get the proficiency. And we had a couple of assessment consultants, whatever that even means, but they came in to talk to us, and they said that one of my problems was too many of my rubrics had specific instructions, like include 3 sources, or make sure that you discuss 5 events. And they actually said that that's a poor way to design rubrics. I agree and disagree. You know, like, there are sometimes that kids really do need some direct guidance, but I understand in a way that, like, sometimes they'll just look at those specific directions and they'll just kind of, like, do paint by numbers, and they're not really thinking. They're just doing exactly what you're telling them to put in their project. You know, so I'm trying to keep them broad enough that they can experiment and do their thing, but I don't want it to be so subjective that all of this is on me to decide this vague, like, what is proficient versus exemplary versus developing, and that decides whether or not they move on to the next course and get credit. Because in a way, that puts me in a tough spot, because I have a lot of subjectivity there on how I'm assessing it. So that's where I'm a little bit torn on how do I develop my rubrics for these proficiencies, and how specific do I get. Because the more specific I get, the more standardized I get the student's learning. And we can all agree that we don't necessarily want that. Like, we want standards, but we don't want to standardize what the students are doing all the time. Versus, you know, how much subjectivity do I put into this grading, and how fair is that for the kids, especially if they have to get proficiency to move on in our high school. So that's kind of where I'm on the fence a little bit, is which direction do I lean towards? Or am I creating a false choice here? Like, is there another way that I could think about it that I'm not thinking right now?
I definitely think that, I don't know, I don't think that subjectivity is necessarily a bad thing in classrooms. I know that right now the current pendulum swinging towards more rubrics, more clarity on how grading works. And I get the value of that, but kind of, as you pointed out in your own argument, we're creating kids that can follow a recipe, and just because their projects all turn out and we can hang them on the wall and we can have a gallery night at our schools or whatever, but if it's just painting by numbers, did we really create those artists? You know, like, it'll all look good from the outside, But I think the fact that we're all here for a Google Hangout shows we're not the educators that just want it to look good on the outside. We want something to be on the inside of those students. And sometimes I think subjectivity is where more learning happens, because the student really has to critically think, like, what is a good project? And your students, being high school students, have seen good projects for years. So I don't think it's all on you to all of a sudden explain what a good project is.
Yeah.
Because, you know, it's not like you're the first class they've ever walked into. And I think that's a falsehood in teaching, that we all feel like, well, I have to define it because the kids wouldn't know what a good project is. Like, baloney. I give them the speech every year, like, you guys have been in school a long time as sixth graders, and you've seen good projects and you've seen bad projects, and you know what an A is and you know what a B is, and you know. And I can sit here and some projects I give out checklists, some projects I give out rubrics, and some projects I give out nothing. And I sometimes believe the one I give out nothing to ends up being some of the best projects.
Yeah, because you've taken the shackles off, and you know, my students are great. They want to follow the rules. They want to get the right grade that they're supposed to, and you know, so I try to include at least 3 of these, right? And so they can do more. And I tell them just is a 4-letter word, because so I just have to have 3 examples. So I just need 4 sources, and I say just is a 4-letter word. You should have awesome examples. You should have as many examples as you possibly can. Because I don't understand just. But I don't want to keep us longer than we want to be here. I know we're trying to cram the last 6 months into 1 hour. Maybe we should do this again sometime.
I agree.
Tom, as you and George, as you guys move forward, you know, we had talked about possibly having more discussions about moving towards standard-based grading and what that might look like. You know, I would love to have another Google Hangout with you guys talking about that topic and how to lay it out, how best to assess, and all those things.
Absolutely. Yep, I'm in.
I would love to do this, mine.
And I'd like to say a similar thing about this thing that I've been trying to do since I talked to Mr. Stubbs at FlipCon last summer. This whole CSI type thing that he's created with his students. I want to talk more about that because I just can't figure it out, but I know it's a good idea. In there, I've started calling it collaborative sustained inquiry, where I give them 3 pictures and they figure out what the connections are and how it relates to each other and how it relates to history and government.
What was that
That's
again,
a cool idea.
Jason?
I called it
No, I mean
collaborative sustained inquiry.
the gentleman that you got that from.
Flip Your Thinking on Twitter. His name is Phil Stubbs. He's from Australia. He works with the Verso app, and he's just a real quick story to make the time longer. He gives his students like a picture of the Catholic Church, a picture of the king, and a picture of something else, and he says, I don't know, go figure out the connections. And he says the students' walls, the walls are the students' walls. And so they connect it like it's a CSI investigation, and they start adding up, you know, Anne Boleyn and people who got their heads chopped off, and they start adding up the Church of England, and so they start making all these connections, and they finally sort of present to him what they've figured out, and he uses that as his introduction to the Reformation. So instead of saying, today we're going to learn about the Reformation, he says, this is what you learned about what was going on. Here's what the reaction to that was.
It's very Ramsey-esque.
Yeah, it's exactly. And so when he was telling me this, I was saying, I need to do that, but I don't know how.
Well, we'll talk about it in Wisconsin. I'll figure it out, and then we'll talk.
I like it.
Excellent. I'll show you some ideas that I have, and I'm doing it next week. So
All right.
Is everybody on the Voxer group? If not, you should get there. Yeah, Chuck,
Definitely.
I don't think is. We'll have to figure that out. All right, I'm going to stop this broadcast now. Thanks for being here, guys. You are all brilliant, and your students are lucky to have you.
You're